The Boston Bruins were just robbed in a controversial signing they have just made in Tanner Jeannot. We're going to be breaking this contract down, going over why, although it's not a great contract, there are some upside to this and why it follows Cam Neely's ideas of what this free agency was supposed to be for the Boston Bruins. But although the signing, as I mentioned, is not one of the greatest, there are some things that we need to discuss here, and I want to get your opinion on it here. And you're going to want to stick around to the end of the video because I feel like we have something that every Bruins fan is feeling. But before we do get into this video, you know the deal right now. We're on the road to 10K, currently sitting at just over 7K. We hit that a couple days ago, and your guys' sport's been absolutely phenomenal as of late. I appreciate everybody watching the video. So if you're looking for a spot for all of your Bruins news, you're going to have it right here. We have a bunch of videos coming. Third of the day here right now. We believe we're second. I lost track, but there's so much stuff going on. We got to get into this right away. So let's get on to it. Let's get right into it here. And Tanner Jeannot, 5 by 3.4 in Boston. This tweeted out from Elliot Friedman here earlier today. Went a little bit because we saw that multitude of signings the Bruins had made. A lot of bottom six guys, and Tanner Jeannot, once again, is another one of those. But this is a much different one. The contract, 5 years by $3.4 million. We're going to get into his projections here in a moment, but this is genuinely a shocking contract. You know, Tanner Jeannot is the guy that you get for specific reasons. You get to be a physical guy, one of these modern-day star protectors, and we're going to kind of jump into that as well here in a moment, but right now, it just does not seem like the Bruins are making the right decisions here in free agency at all. You go from names like Brock Besser, from Nikolai Ehlers being like DeMarco Rossi, and you're not getting any of these talent, and, you know, Tanner Jeannot is being your biggest signing. That's where things are going in the wrong direction here for the Boston Bruins, but, you know, we kind of got to move on once again, and you take a look at Rono Analyst's projections here, or their projected kind of a chart, I guess you could call it. It's not great. There is very, very little offense coming out of Tanner Jeannot. The defense really is only his, impact and, his actual physical play as well, being the real positives from him. Apart from that, there's not a whole bunch that we can really take away from this. He plays both sides, 28 years old, 32 when the contract expires. It's one of these deals that, you thought you got rid of in a guy like Trent Frederic, but now you're bringing in Tanner Jeannot, who, although is more physical, has less offense, and is on a questionable contract and a questionable decision to bring in by the Boston Bruins organization here. But, we got to kind of take this with a grain of salt. Not even just do that, but kind of take it as what it is, not at face value. Go into the weeds of what this Boston Bruins team is trying to do with a guy like Tanner Jeannot, and I feel like that really comes down to, looking at his WAR compared to, everything else compared to his defense here. And the WAR, 10%. Really not good. You see last year, the offense up top, or the defense, going up in the percent over the past few seasons. He's been getting better on defense. The offense also did get better, but it was pretty flatline. But apart from that, when you're going looking at his WAR percentile, it has gone down. And he has been a big force wherever he's been. He's not been the guy that's going to go score goals. He's not been the guy that's going to go and, put the puck in the back of the net. But as for Tanner Jeannot, he's not a terrible player if he's surrounded by the correct players. Now, on this contract, it still may not look good, but his defense impact, pretty good. As you see there, 72%. Not really known for his defense, but when he's on the ice, he's just making the right decisions, and he's a physical guy. Players are scared of a guy like Tanner Jeannot, and I think that's one thing the Bruins we're looking to add. We already have Mark Kastelic, Nikita Zadorov, and now adding Tanner Jeannot to that lineup. There's not going to be many players who want to be in front of this Bruins net, and I feel like that's something they're trying to focus on as well. Trying to focus on not just the skill, the talent that this team possesses, but also come into this as, we're trying to have a different narrative as a team. We're not trying to be this team that missed the playoffs this year. We need to forget that. We're coming out here to make an impact and to show everybody that we're not the same team at all as last year. Tanner Jeannot does do that, but it is a much more expensive option than what anybody would have really liked to see here. Now, diving into Tanner Jeannot's stats, as I mentioned, he's not a guy that's going to put the puck in the back of the net. 7 goals, 6 assists, fourth line minutes, 10 minutes time on ice. He's not a guy that's going to be out there every day, but 211 hits in the season. He's been, I believe, one of the leaders during the regular season. He's a guy that's not afraid to throw the body. He's not a guy that's really, known to shoot the puck at all either, but in those 67 games, he has a lot of highlights in that. A lot of those are, however, are hits, are, physical plays, which, of course, the Bruins like. That's kind of their identity, but even though it is almost sort of time to get away from that, you got to focus on your skill now. You got to focus on getting better, and they didn't do that today. And, kind of going back to that as well, the bottom 6 signings that they made, they have way too many now. You still don't want to trust rookies in a NHL spot, without having any experience in the AHL. We certainly know that, the way that has happened with Lysell, Merkelov, but it's coming into it now. You're looking at a lineup that is, a lot older in the bottom 6, and you have so many options. So unless the Bruins are planning on making some trade, making some other move elsewhere, I will say it is a pretty big loss in a free agency market that was pretty good, pretty deep. It had a lot of players the Bruins could have worked with, and it really doesn't kind of come out to the situation we wanted to be, unless that we saw Don Sweeney, Cam Neely not really trust where this Bruins team and what this free agent market could have brought together to put into this season. So I think it's something to kind of just take away from this and look at down the line of what it could happen. Because, as I mentioned, when we kind of look at the bottom 6 here, I was going to say bottom 3, but when you go take a look at even, John Beecher as well, the bottom 6, Tanner Jeannot, Sean Kuraly, Matt Poitras, Marat Huznatinov, Mikey Eyssimont, Mark Kastelic, John Beecher, Lysell, Merkel over there. John Farinacci is another player that made up a little bit last season. Fraser Minton, that right there, that's 9 players in the bottom 6 that you have there. A lot of these young players are not going to be in there, and at $2.9 million in cap space, you're now limited to getting a good player has to be by a trade. And, I don't really know who they would trade in this lineup apart from Casey Middlestat and maybe even Pavel Zacha, but apart from that, this lineup seems pretty set now for what it is. Of course, you never really know what's going to happen with a guy like James Higgins. Still make him up next year, but the way that we've seen Cam Neely break down this lineup, break down what he wants the Bruins to be, he did kind of say this, and it makes a lot of sense now with the moves they've been making. It's not just about getting in and getting bounced out in round 1. We're here to understand that we have to build a team that's going to compete for Stanley Cups. Now, making that kind of idea come into where the Bruins currently stand, they're making it seem like a very similar lineup to what we saw in Florida, what we saw in Tampa in their dynasty kind of a couple years ago. Those are the lineups that we really saw success in the playoffs. These deep lineups who have guys like Sean Kuraly, Mikey Eyssimont, who play in the bottom 6 and kind of re-energize the team whenever your stars are not on the ice. And that's true. That's always a big lineup now, and we're starting to see that, how much it actually matters now in the NHL. But I don't think those guys will be able to do that by themselves. I still think that there are many holes in the bottom 6, but it gives you many opportunities to go and try. Now, they're not on a 2-way contract, so they will have to go through waivers if you want to send them down. I think the Bruins are really turning into a team that is looking to flip a lot of these guys at the deadline. So, I think there's a lot going on here. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's really going to kind of play out to work and play out, because we saw it a couple years ago. Tanner Jeannot get traded for a first-round pick. If that's the Bruins' plan, maybe down the line, maybe a couple months down the line here, we can say, yeah, this made a lot of sense now looking back on it. They're trading half these guys away to playoff teams if they're planning on, tanking again. But I think it's a matter of time until we really wait and see. But one thing about this, and I feel like a lot of people can kind of agree with this, is that Steve Conroy tweeted this out, a little protection for Higgins in the future, and it does seem like it makes a little bit of sense this way when you put it into this perspective. James Higgins may crack the lineup here in a couple of years. Tanner Jeannot, 5-year deal. It comes down to it, when Higgins gets into the NHL, that contract will look a lot cheaper because we know the cap is going up significantly. To make that deal probably look like what his projection actually was at a 2-year, $1.4 million. But right now, even with this lineup, going $2 million over your projection and 3 more years is not a good look for the Bruins. And, hopefully they have something up their sleeve. And I almost feel like they do, but not saying it. But we really have to just find out at a later date, because it's too early to tell right now, and we need some explanations from Don Sweeney, from Cam Neely behind the idea of this. But one thing that I mentioned earlier in the video that a lot of people are looking at, this comes from a Panthers fan on Twitter, thinking about how the Bruins didn't want to pay Brad Marchand, but turned around and gave out $7.5 million to Tanner Jeannot and Victor Arvidsson. Putting it this way doesn't sound great, but, Brad Marchand's significantly older than these two guys. Victor Arvidsson is a guy for 1 year. Tanner Jeannot, you got 5 years. Contract will be looking good. Maybe you'll flip. You don't really know, but things are going crazy. And, we're going to see a lot more news down the pipeline here. But for right now, this is everything the Bruins have done. We had the moves earlier. We got this video now going over the Tanner Jeannot. And, I still think there's some moves that the Bruins have. So you're going to want to stick around, find out. I'll have it here as it happens for you guys. But it's all I got right now. So if you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button. Let me know what you think about this Tanner Jeannot signing. I feel like we've seen the fans pretty split on this one. I don't know for sure if I like it or yet. I kind of got to sleep on it to see, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. But that's all I got in this video. If you did enjoy, like I said, give it a like, hit the sub button. I'm signing out. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.